Let's talk about you, John Flaherty. Let's dig in deep. Now, at the Safe at Home Foundation dinner, both you and David Cohn had said if called, you would have interest in the managerial position. It was at least out there. You were asked questions about it. Take us through that process and what happened.
Well, I think all three of us should be interested in this manager's position, right? I mean, and that's really what it came down to for me. When this job opened up and you started hearing Brian Cashman talking about thinking outside of the box and maybe coaching or managing experience wasn't going to be a prerequisite, I said, why not throw my hat out there? My agent called Brian, let him know that we were interested in the possibility. Brian was very receptive, but haven't heard anything more. So I just wanted to make sure that he knew that this is something that I would want to do, I would love to do. And as long as he knows that, then I'm fine with it.
That's good. Just put the word out there, no doubt about it. So let's take a look at the 5 candidates that have interviewed for the spot so far with Brian Cashman and several of his lieutenants. Rob Thompson, the Yankees bench coach, very familiar to the organization and the Yankees fans. Eric Wedge, the former Indians manager and Mariners manager. He's the Blue Jays minor league field coordinator right now. Hensley Mullins, the Giants bench coach. Aaron Boone, the ESPN broadcaster and former Yankee and associated with several other teams. And then Chris Woodward, the Dodgers third base coach. So as we look at those candidates, the one I want to start with, Jack, is Wedge, just because he's the lone candidate with managerial experience, and Cashman said maybe that was where he wanted to start.
Right. Wedge is a guy who we know has managed in a couple of places before, so he's the person, when you sit down and interview him, you know that he's done it, but you ask yourself, what will he bring in terms of coming into New York? We see his resume right there, an AL Manager of the Year on his mantle. I thought when Joe Girardi was told that he was not coming back, there were a couple of things that Cashman would be looking for. It was going to be someone who was a great communicator, someone who Cashman probably had a previous relationship with, and someone who's going to be receptive to analytics, because the Yankees, like most organizations, are very analytically driven. And when I look at Wedge, I don't know that all of those boxes are checked. It doesn't mean that maybe he looms as a bench coach candidate or somebody who could be on the Yankees staff, but I'm not sure that right now, as we talk about the candidates, that he's a front runner or a favorite.
I played with Eric Wedge, so I know the personality. Very fiery. He's an intimidating type of a personality where he's not afraid to get into a player's face and kind of present his will on that player. I don't know if that works in today's age, Jack. I kind of agree with you. I think the analytics, he would have to learn all of that stuff. A very, very bright baseball man who's a great motivator. But when you talk about a young team and maybe the communication issues that Joe Girardi didn't have with some of the young players, I don't know if Eric Wedge kind of fits the bill there.
Yeah, the old school term I don't think applies. And I'm sure guys can be malleable a little bit, but then you look at some of the other candidates. And, Jack, what I find interesting is when Brian Cashman started by saying, I might want somebody with managerial experience, pretty sure of that. Maybe through the process, he looked at some of the other guys and said, well, you know what, this might work. I like what I'm hearing from some of the guys that have been coaches, or even from an Aaron Boone that hasn't.
Right, somebody like Boone who's done it on the broadcast side. And here's why Boone is interesting to me. When you listen to the conference call that he did and listen to him talking about the possibility of being a manager, Brian Cashman reached out to him. Brian Cashman, from previously knowing Aaron Boone as a player and from listening to him as a broadcaster, and I'm sure having a lot of baseball conversations with him, he thought he was a guy who could come in and get the job done. And that's why Boone seems as a guy who could be a favorite or a front runner to me. Probably has the charisma to come in and handle the media. The communication part of it, he would obviously have that nailed. Teammates have talked about him being a good teammate. He did the media side of things. So I think Boone would have all of that under wraps, and then you'd probably want to get him a strong bench coach since he never has managed at the major league level.
Well, when you talk about Aaron Boone, the three of us can probably relate to this. Can you go from this business into a major league clubhouse and gain the respect of young players? You know, players that probably didn't know a whole lot about Aaron Boone's playing career. Obviously, the three of us do, but that would probably be the biggest question mark for me, is going into a clubhouse, not ever coaching, managing, and being able to lead a young team. I think the media is a no-brainer. He would be able to deal with that easily. Analytics, he would be that nice go-between between the computer guys, general manager Brian Cashman, relay that information to the club. Great communicator. Aaron Boone is a great candidate.
Would there be any sense that the players kind of know him because they've watched him on Sunday Night Baseball?
Oh, that's a great point. And also, Aaron does a great job of working the batting cage when he's working those games, developing some of the relationships and conversations with some of the young players. And that's all fine. but you don't get to know the personalities, and that would probably be the biggest challenge for him if he got this job during spring training.
If the players took a look at the scoreboard every once in a while, there is this big home run that Aaron Boone hit, too, against Tim Wakefield back in the day. I'm joking here, but John makes a great point. I've walked up to current players, the 22, 23, and 24-year-olds, and mentioned to David Cohn, a guy who won almost 200 games in his career, and they don't always know the finer points of the guy's career, but then I think it's incumbent upon the player, as we're talking about here. A guy like Aaron Boone, you make sure that you strengthen those relationships. And as Girardi exited or was asked not to come back, one of the things we heard about so much was the communication side. And it's not about the Brett Gardners or the CC Sabathias, the veteran players who can self-police. It's about the younger guys. It's about Sanchez. It's about Judge. It's about the Gleyber Torreses and the Chance Adams going forward. The next Yankee manager needs to connect with those guys.
Which leads me to a guy that would not have been on the top of anybody's radar probably when Girardi was not renewed, and that's Hensley Mullins. Yep. Raved about in San Francisco as their hitting coach and his relationship with players. Has one with Didi Gregorius and some of the other players. What are your thoughts on Mullins?
Well, he's intriguing, right? I mean, he has a coaching experience. He was going to be the bench coach for the San Francisco Giants this year. You see the resume there. Bilingual, speaks what, maybe 4 or 5 different languages. He has managed in the WBC, so he checks off a lot of the boxes that Jack was talking about. Came up through the Yankee system, knows New York a little bit, and the one thing that I love listening to him when he was talking to the media, he's all about winning. He's, preaches that I have won at every level. That's what I'm about day in and day out. Obviously, coming to the New York Yankees, it's about winning a World Series. Mullins is a strong candidate in a lot of different ways. I think he checks a lot of the boxes, Jack.
I covered Hensley Mullins as a player in his Yankee career, and to think of the path that he has taken since a Yankee career that really didn't go the way that he wanted to, guys. He was this hyped prospect, Bam Bam Mullins. He was going to come in and he was going to succeed with the New York Yankees, and that didn't happen. And I've always had a ton of respect for Mullins, the path that he has taken to get to this point, how hard he has worked as a coach. So if you're looking for communication, John mentioned the language skills. If you're looking for a guy who's done it, he's coached for several years. He managed the Netherlands in the WBC. He has a very strong resume. The one thing I would think about was the analytical side. He said during his conference call that was something he would feel he would have to work on, and the Yankees would make him work on that. As I said, this team believes in analytics, and that's not changing.
Jack, really quickly before we go to break, where do you think Robbie Thompson stands in this whole process?
I'm glad Rob Thompson got an interview. He deserved to have that interview. 28 years in the organization. I think Rob Thompson would make a great manager. I tweeted that out a day or two after Joe Girardi did not return. But one thing that happened today, Bob, he is given permission by the Yankees to interview for the bench coaching position with the Philadelphia Phillies. That sends a little bit of a sign to me. If the Yankees thought that Thompson was their guy and did not want to lose him and wanted to have him in the managerial spot, I'm not sure they would have given him permission to interview for that other job.